Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into something that I think is pretty important, especially for our younger listeners out there, and that is youth unemployment. We're going to be looking at a really interesting article from Economics Help that breaks it all down, and they actually focus a lot on kind of Western economies,
Mm.
especially places like the UK and the US. And one of the things that really jumped out at me right at the beginning was this idea that youth unemployment often hits even harder than overall unemployment.
Yeah, it doesn't always just perfectly mirror the broader trends.
Yeah.
Youth unemployment can be influenced by like a unique set of factors
Yeah.
and often follows kind of its own patterns.
So the article starts off talking about this thing called structural unemployment, which basically means that sometimes like young people are just entering a job market that requires skills they haven't quite had a chance to develop yet.
Right. It's almost like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole.
Yeah.
The job market's constantly changing. Yeah, especially nowadays with things like automation and digital skills being so in demand. It's really hard for education systems to keep up sometimes.
It makes you wonder, right? Like, are traditional education models kind of becoming a little outdated? And is that putting young people at a disadvantage?
It's a big question.
Sure.
And it kind of raises questions about how we're preparing young people for this kind of new world of work. For example, there was this study in the UK that the article highlights, and it found that there was actually a correlation between like poor math and English GCSE results and higher rates of youth unemployment later on. So those foundational skills are definitely important, but it kind of shows how we also need things like better vocational training and apprenticeships too.
Yeah, so it's not just about what you learn in the classroom, it's about bridging that gap between the classroom and what employers are actually looking for.
Exactly. It's about having those practical hands-on skills,
Hmm.
you know.
Okay, so let's talk a bit about geographical unemployment. The article gives the example of the UK's Northeast, where the employment rate for 16 to 24-year-olds is like way lower than the national average.
Yeah, geographical unemployment shows how these regional disparities, these economic disparities can really impact things. Like certain areas might just have fewer job opportunities or certain industries might be clustered in certain regions. Think about what happened in the US Rust Belt where manufacturing jobs declined and that led to way higher unemployment, especially for younger workers who hadn't really had a chance to get established in other fields.
It's almost like a domino effect, right? You have these economic struggles in one area, and it kind of trickles down and affects job prospects for everyone. But young people often get hit the hardest.
They do because they might not have the experience or the networks to like easily relocate or transition to a new industry.
Makes sense. All right, so now let's talk about something kind of real wage unemployment. Because this one is really interesting. The article talks about minimum wage rates in the UK as an example, and how they differ based on age.
Uh, yeah, this is where things get a little tricky, right? This whole debate about minimum wage laws. On the one hand, you know, minimum wage is supposed to protect workers, especially those who are just starting out. But then there's the argument that if you set it too high, it could actually lead to fewer job opportunities for young people
Mm.
because businesses might not be able to afford to hire them.
Yeah, it's like a delicate balance you need to find. You want to make sure young people are earning a fair wage, but you don't want to accidentally make it harder for them to even get their foot in the door.
Exactly. And it gets even more complicated when you start thinking about things like inflation and the cost of living going up, up, up. If wages aren't keeping up with those increases, young people are basically earning less in real terms, which can make this whole unemployment situation even worse.
Okay, so another thing the article talks about is cyclical unemployment. Basically, this is unemployment that is directly related to like the ups and downs of the economy.
Right, especially during those recessions. Think back to 2008, for example. The article says that youth unemployment actually spiked way faster than overall unemployment during that time. It's like young people are often the first to be let go when things get tough.
Why is that? Is it just because they have less experience?
It's definitely partly that, yeah. Less experience, less seniority. But it's also because of how a lot of industries are structured. Companies often hold on to their more senior employees, those with specialized knowledge and established networks, even when times are bad. And when resources are tight, they might be hesitant to invest in training brand new, less experienced workers.
So it's a double whammy for young people in those situations.
Yeah.
Not only are there fewer jobs to begin with, but they're also facing even more competition and are seen as kind of more expendable, I guess.
Yeah, it shows how vulnerable they are to those bigger economic forces. But it also shows that there's more to youth unemployment than just these big economic cycles, right?
Yeah.
There are also these individual and social elements at play too.
Right. There's more to it than just the overall economic picture. And the article actually goes into this other type of unemployment called frictional unemployment, which I
Yeah.
thought was really interesting. It's all about that time when you're first starting out, like just finished school and trying to get that first job.
It is kind of like starting fresh in a way. You have to kind of learn as you go, figure out how to find the right opportunities. Things like job search skills, networking, even just how efficient the labor market is in matching people to jobs. All of that can affect how long it takes to find a good fit.
And then there are these cultural and social factors that come into play as well, which I thought was really eye-opening.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, think about it. If young people grow up in an area where everyone's kind of pessimistic about the job market, that's going to have an effect.
Right. Almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you don't think there are any good jobs out there, why bother putting in the effort, right?
Exactly. And this connects to what we were talking about before, those regional disparities. Like in some areas, young people might face bigger hurdles because of things like poverty or discrimination, or even just not having access to good education or networks.
So it's all kind of intertwined then, these social factors and economic factors all feeding into each other. How do we even begin to break that cycle?
Well, it's complicated, right? There's no easy answer, but it definitely requires us to look at the bigger picture. We have to address those underlying issues, like inequality, and invest in programs that give young people support and guidance. We need to create pathways for them to get good education, training, and real work experience.
It's interesting because the article also mentions this thing called hysteresis, which is like the idea that if you're unemployed for a long time, it can actually make it harder to find a job in the future.
Oh yeah, hysteresis can be a real problem. Imagine someone who graduates right in the middle of a recession. They might spend months or even years looking for work. But while they're searching, their skills can get outdated. And then when they finally do apply for jobs, employers see this gap on their resume, and they might assume they haven't been doing anything, that they haven't kept up with their field. It's a vicious cycle.
So we need to find ways to keep young people engaged, even when it's tough to find a job. Help them stay up to date on their skills, build their network so they don't fall into that trap of long-term unemployment.
Exactly. There are programs out there that offer retraining opportunities, connect people with mentors, help them learn those essential job searching skills, that kind of thing.
It's important to remember, too, that not every young person is in the same boat. The article points out that sometimes those youth unemployment rates can be a little misleading if we don't take into account how many young people are still in school or some kind of training.
Right? They might not be actively looking for work yet. So a youth unemployment rate of, say, 15% doesn't automatically mean that 15% of all young people are sitting around doing nothing. There's a whole group that's focused on learning and developing themselves, which is a good thing.
So investing in education is still key then.
Oh, absolutely. But it's not just about any education. It's about making sure that what they're learning is actually relevant to what employers are looking for.
So we've covered a lot of different angles here. The economic forces, social and cultural factors, even some of the individual challenges that young people might face. It's obviously a very complicated issue with no easy fixes. It's definitely a multi-layered problem. But I mean, the article does offer some ideas for how we can start tackling this. Like, what were some of the things that stood out to you?
Well, it seems pretty clear that there's not going to be some magic solution that works for everyone. What we need are these kind of comprehensive strategies that address all those different factors we were just talking about. Investing in better education and training, making sure it aligns with what's happening in the job market, and dealing with those regional economic differences. It's a lot.
So it sounds like it's going to take like a collective effort.
Oh, for sure. It's going to take governments, businesses, schools, communities, everyone working together to really make a dent in this. We have to create an environment where young people actually have the support and the resources they need to thrive.
And I guess even as individuals, there are things we can do right. Like, what can we do in our own lives to kind of help young people navigate this whole thing?
I mean, mentorship is huge, right? Whether it's through some formal program or just, informal connections. Sharing your own experiences, your insights, your network, all of that can be so valuable to someone who's just starting out. And businesses can offer internships or apprenticeships, give young people that real-world experience and open up doors for them.
It's about giving them those first few steps, those early wins that can really boost their confidence. And for those of you listening who are maybe just starting your careers, don't underestimate what you can do yourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Seek out mentors, build your network, and keep learning, always. The job market never stands still, so you can't either.
It's not just about finding a job, it's about having that mindset, being ready to adapt and learn new things as the world changes around you.
I think this whole conversation has been really interesting. It's shown just how complicated this issue is,
Mm.
but I think it's also given us some hope because when we understand the problems, we can start to find real solutions.
I agree. It's about moving past those simple explanations and understanding that young people are not all the same.
And remember, this is just the starting point. There's always more to learn, more perspectives to consider.
Definitely. If you're interested in diving deeper into this, the economics help article we talked about is a great place to start. It's got tons of information and it really lays it all out there.
Keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep talking about how we can create a better, more fair job market for everyone.
Well said. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into youth unemployment. Until next time, stay curious.